The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and does not represent legal or accounting advice or counsel and should not be seen as such. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. We make no promises or assertions on how this information will impact your business, your personal life, or financial well-being. The information relayed does not imply endorsement or offer opposition to any specific organization, product, or services. Welcome to SHifT. I'm your host, Lori Power, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So welcome, Connie Clark, owner of Mission Computers, author of OneNote. Today, she's agreed to join me to talk about what happens when a company doesn't take care of the training capacity within their organization and how it can erode that value of the organization when you go to sell. We're going to talk specifically today about overproduction, duplication of work. Usually those are distractions as well as people try to learn and gain knowledge on themselves for themselves. And it wastes a lot of productivity time within the organization and it can erode that value. The other thing is to look at wastage, right? We're going to be looking at specifically of different wastage. Can you start with an introduction first though, Connie, as I jump ahead of myself? Can you start first with an introduction on you and your business, how long you've been in business, and really what keeps you motivated in this sphere?
Sure. Thanks, Lori. And thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so excited to talk about this. As Lori said, my business is all about actually technology. So I teach people how to use their technology more effectively so that they can be more productive and more efficient and really using it the right way so it empowers them and it helps them do their business better. And so it's not just about press this key, press that key. It's more about, well, what is the result that you're trying to attain? And let's see how we can take you there. Now, most of my work these days is with the Microsoft 365 products like Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and OneNote. And OneNote, of course, I've written a book about. But there's a lot of related products in the Microsoft 365 that can help businesses and really help them with reducing that wastage and improving that communication and really making a more resellable business because they have so much information already built in to systems that are part of their digital plan, if you will. So I've been doing teaching. I've been teaching and consulting for over 30 years now. And really, I just kind of ride the technology wave. Sometimes it's going up and sometimes it's going down. I'm having to learn and figure things out along the way. And it's fun. Sometimes it's frustrating, but it's really worth it to understand what is happening for the improvements. And I think where we're maybe losing out sometimes is that people are taking on new technology, but not taking on the new methods. They're doing new technology in old ways. Right. So, and we can get into that. And that's where I think there's a lot of, maybe wasted time because they know how to deal with files and file folders and that kind of stuff. So they keep doing that kind of system in something like SharePoint and Teams when there's more things they could be taking advantage of that would actually improve their productivity. So yeah, I'm all about helping people kind of open their eyes to what the new technology can give them for efficiencies.
I want to ask you about overprocessing because the way that you've introduced new technologies but using old ways really keys, to my mind, a lack of organizational process in and of itself, like the structure and the time lost, revenue lost, productivity lost through over processing. Can you give me a couple of examples of where, when you're working with clients, you actually see that over processing wastage?
Okay, well, the first one kind of hits a nerve with a lot of people, and that is email. If you continue to let all of your employees just save everything that they can under the sun in their email program, then you're really creating little separate islands of information, right? And although it tends to feel better for the employee to know that, okay, I got the email, I know where the thing is, I know how to search my own email. It doesn't help the company as a whole because now we have all these versions of information in different places, and there's no one. If I were to compare a number of people within the same organization and how they manage their email, it's all different. And I've done this many times. I've taught email management for years, and this is a huge thing. So one of the things I'm suggesting in terms of old way versus new way is, I'm not saying you can't email all you want, but look at what you're keeping. What are you keeping? If it's important for the business and the business to have that record, then put it in a place that makes sense for the business, not for yourself, not for your own email purposes, but for the business. And so that could be a SharePoint area, that could be somewhere in your Teams, that could be somewhere in your notebook, but you need to standardize what makes sense. And as an organization, or as a leader of an organization, you really need to decide, probably with your group, what can we do so that we don't create these silos of information that causes us problems? And I've heard people get into legal issues because of that, because their lawyers take longer to go through everyone's email to find stuff centralized. So that's one thing. That's one thing where we're really stuck in that old way of, I keep my emails, you keep yours, it's my business, your business. It's not. It's the business. So if it's the business, it shouldn't be about you. It should be about how the business does it. So that's one area. The other area is of files, how you keep your files. A lot of people are transitioning to OneDrive and SharePoint within their businesses. Maybe they're on a Google Drive. So if they are on a cloud system of some kind, then usually their IT person has it set up in such a way that 100% of the information is going to that cloud. Now, I don't find that people understand what that means sometimes, because they sometimes don't know, well, which cloud is it on, right? So is it on OneDrive or is it on SharePoint, or do I put it in Teams? And so just understanding where things are kept, which cloud are you on, and which cloud should you be on, so that the business has their information in the right place. So I'm not going to get into it too deeply there, but just those kinds of things. So really just those standards, under the education for everybody in terms of what to expect and how to do it. So
if the end recipient is the client and we're working in the best interest of the client, we want to attract, retain that client to our organization, it's really important to surround them with a team that understands where to find the information, when they can find the information, and how best to relay that information through to the client. And that comes down to the communication, that structure, and the process within the organization. And any potential buyer into looking at that organization to buy it, they want to see there's value in having things in your systems organized, having that flow of communication organized. That clearly not only a waste removal that we want to make sure that we're telling people to look at that on how you can remove that kind of duplication waste, but it's also a risk mitigator, right? It's a risk. You mentioned the legal side of things. Imagine if one of the key people on the team is not available when that client needs them, and nobody's able to find that information, right? That could be a substantial, not only reputational risk to the organization, but it can create a liability risk as well.
most definitely. Yeah, and that's what's so different about the new method of doing things compared to the old. So if I have a project ongoing with a customer and I want to keep track of everything about that customer in one place, then the place I'm going to choose is actually Microsoft Teams, because Microsoft Teams lets me hold my files for that customer in there. It lets me take any emails I receive from that customer if they're still sending me emails, which they actually don't. But if they are, I can send that email into Teams and then not keep it in my Outlook And really, that's important legally. I'm not a lawyer, but in terms of just if I keep it so that everything's in the one place and not in another place, then if there is an illegal action, when I'm directing the lawyers to where all our communication is, I'm directing them to the one spot. I'm not saying, oh, but Fred over there, he uses his email and Joan kind of puts it on her desktop. And so then they have to look everywhere, right? So it's in one place. So, and then really the other point with that is that I would want to encourage that customer that's working with me to use the Teams environment to communicate. They don't need to email. We can use OneNote to keep track of any of our processes or any of our instructions or any information we need. So one place to house it all, as opposed to we have files somewhere on our desktops, maybe files in the cloud, we have emails on everybody's desk. That's lots of places to look for stuff. Does that
And
make
that
sense?
to me spells out lots of risk.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about training and wastage of not having. I mean, I think it's a no-brainer. Everybody would agree. You want your staff trained. You hire them with a certain level of expectation coming in. But we see time and again, and you and I have spoken about this in the past, we see
Mhm.
time and again people hire for great credentials and experience, and then they let that go stagnant. We introduce new technology and we make the assumption that somebody coming into our organization, say 3 or 4 years ago, with fabulous credentials, fabulous education, fabulous experience, 3 years later, without keeping up that training, without keeping on top of things, that they're naturally going to be able to move into that new technology without having that training. And I know you see that time and again. Can you give us some examples of what it looks like to an organization that introduces new technology but doesn't take that training steps versus the organization that sets up a regular cadence of training for staff? Even if you have somebody who's very proficient, I think you and I would both agree there's always something to learn.
Well, one thing is having everybody standardized into doing things the same way to get to the same result. And hopefully that also means increasing their efficiencies in the same way. Because I see it time and time again, of course, and I'm going to just use Excel as an example for this. People equate their time working on Excel spreadsheets to their knowledge of Excel. Well, I've been working on Excel for 10 years, so I'm intermediate. And then I'm like, okay, let's test that out. So I will assess them, or actually I will just send them an assessment form. They fill it in. And then more often than not, they say, sorry, Connie, I was wrong. I'm not intermediate. I'm an introductory, even though it's 10 years. So it's time with something does not equate to level of knowledge with something, because usually we're doing the same thing in that product. So we're not taking advantage of the ways to make that product work for us within our organization, within our work. And so when you do training, it's the instructor's job to make sure we understand what's your end goal so that we can help you learn the features of that product so that your end goal is reached, so that you are more efficient, so that your team hears the same message. That's another thing, hearing the same message, right? So, because what happens in an office sometimes is that, oh, it's okay, Joe over there, he's really good with technology. He just goes around and helps people, or they all bug Joe for those questions. Yeah, but first of all, Joe's not getting his time to do his work. And second of all, what does Joe, I mean, does Joe really know that much? Is he a trainer? Is he just showing you or doing your work for you? Is he giving you the best way? So standardization is one big thing. The other thing I find when you take the move to understand that training is an important step is that you're acknowledging that somebody else has the perspective that you don't. So when I'm working with a client and they're explaining to me their situation, what they're coming up against, because lots of times people don't come to me when they buy a product or when they first get it. They come to me when they can't stand it or they hate it or things are not working or they have lots of problems. So it's more a reactive approach rather than a proactive approach, which is fine. That's just the way it's been, and I don't know if that's going to change or not. But they have the pain points, right? So I look at what the situation is and I understand all of the pieces of something like Microsoft 365 well enough to know, okay, what you're telling me. And in my brain, I'm going, that goes there and that goes there, that goes there. Okay, and that going to come back here. But I don't necessarily tell them. I mean, I have a plan and I help them plan out the best approach as opposed to them just saying, oh, we'll just learn this or we'll just, try this one little trick. They don't have that same perspective. It's like the guy that buys the new house but wants to finish the basement, right? And he has no carpentry skills at all, but like how hard can it be, right? I'll just watch a few YouTubes and figure it out. Okay, maybe he puts it together, maybe it works out okay, but the walls might be a little bit crooked and stuff. Or my daughter's actually in the process of trying to find a new house, and she's telling us how many places she's gone that the basements make no sense because there's these little areas and it just isn't mapped out right. And that's because they didn't have the perspective of how to do it. Whereas a skilled carpenter, someone that's been doing it for years, will see, that we're going to have to close off that utility area. We're going to have to make sure we understand where everything's laid out before they start renovating. It's just having that perspective is going to help.
I think you key on it. I really like that analogy. And I'll tell you why I like it, because I can visualize myself trying to finish a basement. I can visualize myself going up to the hardware store and just randomly picking tools and the materials that I think I need.
Yeah.
Bring them back, start a project without a blueprint, but just a general idea in my head, and I'm just going to figure it out. How
Yeah.
much wastage is going to happen? Maybe I've purchased the wrong materials. Maybe I didn't purchase the right tools to get the job done. Maybe at the end of the day, when I sit back and I look at the finished product and I go, hey, I did not a bad job. However, I probably have spent significantly more in wastage and
Yeah.
time that I didn't have to get that job done. And is that job to the caliber that had I had a professional come in and perhaps work with that professional to get the job done?
Mhm.
Sometimes people in organizations, they don't put enough emphasis on the revenue associated with their time.
Right. Yeah.
And that is a significant loss for a business.
I'm going to mention one other thing, and this can hold people back, and I could even be guilty of something like this, and that is the fear of somebody else knowing what you don't know. So I think when people look at someone like me and they go, oh my gosh, she teaches it. I don't know if I can go to her because I don't really know that much. It's like, because I've had people say to me, well, Connie, I want to learn this, but I don't know if you would teach at that level. I'm like, of course I do. Yeah, I start at whatever level you're at. And as people get to know me, they see that there's no judgment. I've seen everything and I learn a lot from people because I love hearing or seeing their perspective on things. Because it's not about what they don't know, it's about how they see stuff. And so I'm not going to say that how I see stuff is right. There's lots of different ways of looking at a situation and making it work. So that goes with technology. But sometimes people don't want me to see stuff. And I say to them, if you show me everything, even the ugly, like that messy desk, that messy computer, don't clean up before I come. Because if you let me see it all, then I can help you create a system for it all. And I can truly help you make a difference that you want to make. If you hide everything, throw everything in your drawer or in your cupboards, it's maybe making you look better for that moment, but it's really not helping you long term. So just let me see it. It's like you're not going to hold your mouth closed while the dentist is trying to take a look. You're going to have to open it up so he can see what really is going on, right? So
What is the before and after impact of proper training on technology?
Before and after can make all the difference in your operation. In fact, I had one of my clients that uh, she was able to take a situation where she was getting phone calls or text messages, actually more so, in the middle of the night from her field staff that are like, I don't understand where I'm going tomorrow, to that never happening again because we created a system. She went from having the stress of housing all the documentation for her safety program and manuals and stuff in one place to centralizing it and making it so easily accessible by everybody that they have a whole new safety system that everyone is very on top of. And she actually sold her business because everything was put together easily in, and I'm not going to say that's why, but I know shortly after she was so happy with how she was able to reorganize her world, and really house it all into Microsoft Teams and related products like OneNote and lists and SharePoint, of course. That she had it all together. All of her staff had easy access, and they were happier for it. The field people loved it because that's a lot of times what you'll hear is like, oh, I don't know, office people will get it, they'll be buy into it, but it's the other people that may not. It's just like we build it for them. We build whatever they need for them. We don't build it for the office when we're talking about their stuff. So yeah, it can make
There's
all the
just so
difference in the
much
world.
there is so much value to a potential buyer to be able to come in and take on the business
Mhm.
instead of having to work into the business and correct everything that is going to cost them more money. They
Yeah,
want something that is going to generate revenue based on what that business is supposed to do
yeah,
instead of having to clean up, which is going to erode that value. That is a great story
yeah.
and one that has a lot of value to it.
Yeah, she loved how it helped her reorganize everything. Like she literally just took her whole business and put it in the one system, right? And that system was the Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, OneNote, that kind of stratosphere, right? So that anybody could walk in and find what they need based on where she laid it out.
Well,
So,
and not to overuse the name as the product, but it really strikes me that we're talking about seeing the organization instead of the individuals, right?
mhm,
We're working for the greater good of the team itself, the organization as its own entity, and
yeah,
not the individuals that are plugging into that
yeah,
organization because they may, in fact, as much as we want to retain our staff, they may come and go, but that's where the knowledge transfer can really happen instead of knowledge loss.
right.
And that is a big deal when it comes to business transitioning is that knowledge transfer. Can the knowledge of the organization transfer into a new owner?
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a second, in terms of knowledge transfer, even from the employee angle, because I've seen a few of my customers do this. When they learn how to use OneNote more effectively, what they're starting to do is they're starting to build notebooks that are shared within, say, their Teams environment or even SharePoint, and they're making that notebook the instruction guide for, it could be the safety. So instruction guide for office procedures, instruction guide for, how do I change the toner? Who do I call? Whatever it might be. That the notebook now has become the central source. It's not the binder on the shelf in Susie's office that we have to run to or figure out where it is now. It's the centralized place of information. So they're creating a knowledge base for their business by using a tool that they already have. Everybody has it, but they're not using it.
Ah, this is really good information, Connie. Tell me the one question that you would like business owners to ask when it comes to whether training and updating technology is, are they ready for it? What's that one question that you wish business owners would ask?
I suppose the question, am I ready to make a change and willing to, stretch myself, get out of my comfort zone enough to maybe look a little bit vulnerable in that I don't know stuff. and learn this technology? Am I ready to give up on a system that maybe isn't serving me anymore, so that I can find a system that serves my business? Let's go from me to the business. Am I willing to give up on, change from what I'm comfortable with to what my business should have to make future owners comfortable with?
Businesses want to stay ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
That's a given, right? We want to stay ahead of the curve. And sometimes we see the purchase of new technology as the basis for staying ahead of the curve. That is sometimes creates more chaos than a solution. How do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, that is such a good question, because that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves is that people purchase new technology. It's like buying the $100 hammer. If you don't know how to use it, what good is it? Like, say you bought the new technology, you have Teams, you have SharePoint, but you've taken no steps to learn it. Oh, but my IT guy, your IT guy is giving you half an hour every 6 months to show you something. Showing isn't teaching. Showing is showing. So you aren't invested. You're not invested if all you've done is purchased it. You're invested when you purchase and you do it and you learn it and you do everything you need to make it work so that your business is better. That's when you're invested.
I love that, Connie. Well said. This has been phenomenal. You've hit a great note here.
With new technology comes new knowledge. And how are you going to achieve it?
Thank you so much for joining today, Connie. I'm really looking forward to our next conversation and exploring this more on how to educate business owners on the value of that knowledge transfer, on the value of their organizational structures and processes, and where that can really help them when they move into that transition or exit mode to attract the right buyer. Thanks so much for joining today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.